Before listening to this thrilling story, remember to subscribe to the channel. The sun had barely risen over the mountains of Pine Ridge when Lucy Morgan awoke, as she did every morning, to the sound of roosters crowing. Her 16 years were reflected in the energy with which she jumped out of bed, crossing her small room decorated with photographs of horses and ribbons from equestrian competitions. She paused for a moment in front of the mirror, gathering her long black hair into a braid, while her honey-colored eyes shone with anticipation of a new day in the stables. The wooden farmhouse she shared with her grandmother, Ellen, was on the outskirts of town, surrounded by green fields and close to the municipal stables where Lucy spent most of her time. Ellen was already in the kitchen, preparing coffee and freshly made pancakes. "Honey, up so early again?" asked the old woman with a knowing smile, already aware of the answer. "Grandma, the new horses for the fair are arriving today," Lucy replied, quickly devouring her breakfast. "Mr. Miller asked me to be there to help with the reception." Ellen observed her granddaughter with a mixture of pride and concern. Since she was little, Lucy had shown an extraordinary connection with horses, a gift that reminded her so much of her missing daughter, Lucy's mother. However, she kept silent about these thoughts, as she had done for years. "Be careful, my love. And don't forget that tonight is the fair's opening dinner," she reminded her, as Lucy put on her work boots. The path to the stables was a familiar trail that Lucy could walk with her eyes closed. The fresh morning air carried the scent of damp earth and freshly cut grass. In the distance, the neighing of horses called to her like a familiar melody. Mr. Miller, the stable manager, was waiting for her at the main entrance. He was a robust man in his 60s, with a face weathered by the sun and an equine wisdom that Lucy deeply admired. "You're early, little one," he greeted her affectionately. "The transports are about to arrive. We'll have exceptional specimens for the fair this year." As they organized the empty stalls, Mr. Miller watched out of the corner of his eye how Lucy moved among the resident horses. Each animal reacted to her presence in a unique way. Some stretched their necks to receive her caresses, others neighed softly as she passed. It was as if the girl possessed a secret language with them, an ability that the old horseman had never seen in his 4 decades of work. The first transport truck arrived shortly after 7. Lucy helped unload the horses one by one, gently guiding them to their temporary stables. Each animal seemed to calm down with her touch, even those most nervous from the journey. "You've got magic in your hands, girl," commented one of the transporters, impressed to see how a nervous chestnut horse calmed down under her guidance. But it was the last truck that would change the course of her life. As the doors of the transport opened, agitated neighs and bangs against the metal walls alerted all those present. "Mr. Miller approached cautiously, reading the transport documents. "Midnight," he muttered, frowning. "They say he's untamable." Lucy felt a shiver run down her spine as she heard that name. From inside the truck, a pair of fierce, dark eyes watched her. The black stallion was an impressive sight. Over 16 hands tall, defined muscles under a coat that shone like polished obsidian, and a presence that emanated power and pain. While the men discussed the best way to unload the horse, Lucy slowly approached the transport. Her eyes met those of the stallion, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. In that gaze, Lucy saw something that others overlooked. It wasn't fury that dominated Midnight, it was deep suffering. "Lucy, get away from there," shouted Mr. Miller, but she barely heard him. "He's scared," she whispered, maintaining eye contact with the animal. "He's not aggressive, he's terrified." With deliberately slow movements, Lucy extended her hand towards the stallion. The men held their breath, expecting the worst. However, to everyone's amazement, Midnight stretched out his neck, his nostrils dilating as he sniffed Lucy's outstretched hand. "That's it," Lucy murmured softly. "No one's going to hurt you here." What happened next left those present stunned. The stallion, which according to rumors had sent 3 trainers to the hospital, followed Lucy out of the transport with the docility of a school horse. His steps were cautious but firm, his eyes never leaving the young woman's face. Mr. Miller approached Lucy once Midnight was safely in his stall. "In 30 years I've never seen anything like it," he admitted, shaking his head in amazement. "That horse. There's something different about him." Lucy nodded, her mind already working on possibilities. "Who's his owner?" she asked, not taking her eyes off the stallion now watching her from his stall. "He comes from the Harrison stables," Mr. Miller replied, consulting the papers. In fact, Sam Harrison himself will be coming to the fair this year. The name made Lucy straighten up. Sam Harrison was a legend in the equestrian world, known for his innovative training methods. However, there was something more to Midnight, something that went beyond a simple case of a difficult horse. As the sun rose in the sky and activity in the stables increased with the proximity of the fair, Lucy remained close to Midnight's stall, observing his movements, studying his behavior. Every so often, the stallion would turn to look at her, as if he were also evaluating her. "There's a story behind those eyes," she murmured to herself. "And I'm going to find out what it is." What Lucy couldn't imagine was that this encounter would not only change her life, but would lead her to discover truths that had remained hidden for years, truths that intertwined with her own family history, and that would test not only her gift with horses, but also her courage and determination. As the sun set over Pine Ridge and preparations for the fair's opening dinner continued, Lucy made one last visit to Midnight. The stallion approached the bars of his stall, allowing her to caress his forehead. "I promise I'm going to help you," she whispered, sealing a silent pact that would mark the beginning of an extraordinary adventure. The night of the fair's inauguration transformed the modest Pine Ridge Town Hall into a spectacle of lights and color. Lucy, dressed in a simple blue dress that her grandmother had insisted she wear, felt out of place among the horse breeders, businessmen, and personalities from the equestrian world. "You look beautiful, honey," Ellen whispered, tucking a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "Your mother would be proud." The mention of her mother provoked in Lucy that familiar mixture of curiosity and pain. The photographs and stories her grandmother shared were not enough to fill the void of her absence, but tonight, her thoughts were occupied by Midnight. The murmur of conversations was interrupted when Sam Harrison made his entrance into the hall. Tall, distinguished, and with some premature grey at his temples that gave him an air of authority, the famous trainer attracted all eyes. Lucy observed him carefully, looking for some indication in his face that would explain Midnight's condition. "Mr. Harrison," Mr. Miller's voice resonated near her. "Allow me to introduce you to someone special. This is Lucy Morgan. She has an extraordinary gift with horses." Sam's penetrating eyes settled on Lucy, who held his gaze with determination. "Ah, yes," he replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I've heard about you. You handled Midnight this morning, didn't you?" "Mr. Harrison," Lucy began, seizing the opportunity. "About Midnight. There's something about him that—" "He's a problematic horse," Sam interrupted, his tone becoming more serious. "But I have plans for him during the fair. In fact, I'd like you to work with us." The proposal took Lucy by surprise. "Work with you? Your gift could be useful," Sam explained. "Besides, I'm always looking for apprentices to pass on my methods." Before Lucy could respond, an elegant woman approached the group. "Sam, darling, they need you at the head table," she said, linking her arm with the trainer's. As she passed Lucy, the woman looked at her in a way that sent chills down her spine. "Victoria Hawthorne," Mr. Miller whispered when the couple had moved away. "Harrison's partner in the stables. They say she's the one who really runs the business." During dinner, Lucy barely touched her food. Her mind wandered between Sam's proposal and the mystery of Midnight. From her table, she could observe the interactions between Sam and Victoria, noting the underlying tension in their apparent cordiality. As the evening ended, Lucy slipped away to the stables. She needed to see Midnight one more time before making a decision. The full moon illuminated the path, and the night silence was only interrupted by the occasional sounds of horses. As she approached Midnight's stall, she stopped in her tracks. A figure was moving in the shadows, whispering something to the stallion. Lucy hid behind a column, holding her breath. "Soon, my beautiful." Victoria Hawthorne's voice was barely audible. "Soon everything will be in place." The stallion responded with a nervous neigh, and Lucy could see how he retreated to the back of his stall, his behavior completely different from what he had shown with her that morning. Victoria left the stable without noticing Lucy's presence, who waited several minutes before approaching Midnight. The horse was trembling slightly. "What have they done to you?" she murmured, caressing his neck. Under her fingers, she felt a scar she hadn't noticed before, hidden under the mane. The decision was made. She would work with Sam Harrison, not for the opportunity to learn from him, but to discover what secrets he and Victoria were hiding about Midnight. The next morning, Lucy arrived early at the stables. Sam was already there, observing Midnight with a critical expression. "Good morning, Mr. Harrison," Lucy greeted. "I accept your proposal." Sam smiled, this time genuinely. "Excellent, we'll start today, but I must warn you my methods may seem unconventional." Over the next few hours, Lucy observed as Sam worked with other horses. His techniques were effective, but there was something about them that unsettled her. The way he established dominance, the subtle but constant use of pressure. "Control is the key," Sam explained. "Horses need to know who's in charge." But when it came time to work with Midnight, the stallion refused to cooperate. His eyes showed a panic that contradicted his apparent aggressiveness. "Let me try," Lucy asked after Sam failed in his third attempt to approach. "Go ahead," he conceded, with a hint of skepticism in his voice. Lucy entered the round pen with Midnight, ignoring the methods Sam had been teaching her. Instead, she sat on the ground, waiting. The stallion observed her curiously. "Come when you're ready," she whispered. To Sam's amazement, Midnight slowly approached Lucy until he brushed her shoulder with his muzzle. "Impressive," Sam muttered, but there was something in his tone that sounded more like concern than admiration. From the stands of the round pen, Victoria Hawthorne observed the scene with an indecipherable expression. Her eyes met Lucy's for a moment, and the young woman felt a shiver run down her spine. That night, as Lucy recounted the day's events to her grandmother, Ellen listened with growing unease. "Be careful, my child," she warned. "Sometimes people are not what they seem." "There's something else, Grandma," Lucy confessed. "When I touch Midnight, I feel as if I already knew him, as if there were a deeper connection." Ellen paled slightly, but before she could respond, someone knocked on the door. It was a messenger with an envelope for Lucy. Inside was a handwritten note. "If you want to know the truth about Midnight, meet me tomorrow at dawn at the old mill. Come alone." Lucy looked at her grandmother, who seemed to have aged 10 years in an instant. "There are things from the past you should know," Ellen finally said. "Things about your mother." The night passed slowly as Ellen revealed fragments of the past she had kept hidden for years. Seated at the old kitchen table, with cups of tea that cooled without being touched, the story began to unravel. "Your mother, Isabel, didn't just have a gift with horses like yours," Ellen explained, her voice trembling slightly. "She discovered something related to the Harrison stables shortly before she disappeared." "What did she discover?" Lucy asked, leaning forward. "I don't know for certain, but the last time I saw her, she was upset. She mentioned experiments, unethical training, and a special horse, a black stallion." Lucy's heart skipped a beat. "Midnight, possibly his father," Ellen replied. Isabel was determined to expose the truth, but then the silence that followed weighed more than words. Lucy processed the information as she looked at the note in her hands. The old mill was on the outskirts of town, a place abandoned for decades. "You can't go alone," Ellen protested. "I have to, Grandma. For Mom." Dawn found Lucy walking along the path to the mill. The structure rose against the pink sky like a sleeping giant, its motionless blades covered in vines. Her heart was pounding as she approached the entrance. "Hello?" she called softly. "In here," a male voice responded. Inside the mill, light filtered through the cracks in the walls, illuminating an older man whom Lucy recognized as one of the oldest workers from the Harrison stables. "My name is Robert," he introduced himself. "I knew your mother." Over the next hour, Robert shared a story that made Lucy's world shake. The Harrison stables, under Victoria Hawthorne's direction, had been conducting secret experiments on horses, studying how trauma and fear could be used to control their behavior. "Your mother discovered it," Robert explained. "She found documents, photographs. Midnight is part of the second generation of these experiments. His father was one of the first horses in the program." "And his foal?" Lucy asked, remembering the stallion's behavior. "Separated from him at birth. It's part of the experiment, studying how trauma is transmitted between generations." Lucy felt nauseous. "Is Sam involved?" "Sam is a puppet," Robert replied. "Victoria is the one who manages everything. But be careful, she's more dangerous than she seems." Before leaving, Robert handed Lucy a worn envelope. "Your mother left this. She knew you'd need it someday." Back at the stables, Lucy observed Midnight with new eyes. The stallion looked at her, and in his gaze she saw the reflection of generations of pain. "I promise this will end," she whispered. The following days were a delicate balancing act. Lucy continued working with Sam, learning his methods while secretly developing her own. Each progress with Midnight was a small victory, each moment of trust gained, a step towards healing. Victoria Hawthorne appeared frequently, observing the sessions with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You have a special gift," she commented one day, "just like your mother." The comment, seemingly innocent, carried a threatening weight that Lucy didn't miss. One afternoon, while working alone with Midnight in the round pen, the stallion began to act strangely. His ears moved nervously, and his eyes fixed on a point beyond Lucy's shoulder. As she turned, she saw a young worker she had never noticed before leading a young horse. The colt, with a coat as black as night, had the same expressive eyes as Midnight. "It's him," Lucy whispered, understanding immediately. "It's his son." The discovery of the colt changed everything. Now Lucy had a clear purpose. Not only did she have to help Midnight overcome his trauma, but also reunite him with his offspring and expose Victoria's experiments. But as she developed her plan, she didn't realize she was being watched more closely than she imagined. Victoria Hawthorne had noticed the changes in her behavior, and the shadows of the past were beginning to cast themselves over the present. One night, while reviewing the documents Robert had given her, Lucy found a photograph that left her breathless. Her mother, younger, holding a black foal next to a stallion that was the spitting image of Midnight. On the back in her mother's handwriting was a note: "The truth cannot remain in the shadows forever. Midnight's lineage is the key." The photograph Lucy held in her trembling hands became the catalyst for a deeper investigation. Over the next few days, she divided her time between training with Midnight and the stealthy search for information in the stable archives. One afternoon, while Sam was supervising her work with other horses, Lucy noticed something peculiar in his behavior. The famous trainer seemed distracted, even nervous, especially when Victoria made her surprise appearances. "Your progress with Midnight is remarkable," Sam commented during a break, "but there's something you need to understand about him. Some horses can't be fully rehabilitated." "Why?" Lucy pressed. "What really happened to him?" Sam looked away. "There are things it's better not to question, Lucy." That same night, after everyone had retired, Lucy snuck into the main office of the stables. With the help of a hairpin and skills she had learned from years of opening rusty locks, she managed to get in. The files were meticulously organized. In a folder marked Project Shadow, she found documents that chilled her blood. Detailed reports on conditioning experiments, forced separation of foals, psychological manipulation of animals, all under Victoria Hawthorne's supervision. A noise alerted her. Footsteps approaching. Quickly, Lucy photographed several documents with her phone and hid behind a file cabinet. Victoria and Sam entered the office. "The colt is responding better than his father," Victoria said. "But the girl is asking too many questions." "It's just youthful curiosity," Sam replied, though his voice betrayed his nervousness. "Like her mother's curiosity?" Victoria's voice turned icy. "You know what's at stake, Sam. We can't allow history to repeat itself." Lucy held her breath. When they finally left, her mind was a whirlwind of questions and connections. The next day, during her session with Midnight, Lucy noticed that the stallion was particularly restless. Following her instinct, she guided him towards the area where she had seen the colt. The reaction was immediate. Midnight began to neigh softly, his ears pointing towards the distant stables. "You miss him, don't you?" Lucy whispered. "And he misses you too." That afternoon, Lucy received an unexpected visit at her house. Robert appeared with more documents. "Your mother didn't disappear," he revealed with a broken voice. "They forced her to leave. I have proof." The documents revealed an elaborate plan of blackmail and threats. Isabel had discovered that Project Shadow wasn't just experimenting on horses, but was also developing training techniques that bordered on cruelty, all under the facade of scientific research. "Victoria Hawthorne has powerful connections," Robert explained. "When your mother threatened to expose everything, they pressured her until she had no choice but to flee." "Is she alive?" Lucy asked, her heart pounding. "The last I heard, she had settled in the south of the country, under another name. But Victoria keeps her under surveillance." Armed with this information, Lucy began to develop a plan, not just to reunite Midnight with his colt, but also to expose the truth and perhaps find her mother. However, fate had other plans. One morning, upon arriving at the stables, she found Midnight's stall empty. "They moved him last night," a stable hand informed her. "Mrs. Hawthorne's orders." Lucy ran to Sam's office, entering without knocking. She found him sitting at his desk, his face in his hands. "Where is he?" she demanded. "I'm sorry, Lucy," he replied without looking up. "I had no choice." "There's always a choice," she retorted, remembering her mother's words in the documents she had found. That night, while planning her next move, Lucy received a text message from an unknown number. "The colt is in the north stables, Midnight in the south. You have 48 hours before they move them permanently. The truth is in the blood." The message was simply signed with an I. Lucy's heart skipped a beat. Could it be? With renewed determination, she began to prepare for what would be the most important mission of her life: saving Midnight, reuniting him with his colt, and finally uncovering the whole truth about her mother and the dark secret that Victoria Hawthorne had kept hidden for so long. The next 48 hours became a race against time. Lucy knew she would need help, and she found it in unexpected places. "I can't let history repeat itself," Sam said, appearing at her house that same night. His face showed the weight of years of guilt. "Your mother was right about everything." Ellen watched from the kitchen as Sam spread detailed plans of both stables on the table. "Victoria has a bigger plan," he explained. "The experiments are just the beginning. She's developing a trauma-based training method that she plans to sell internationally." "Why are you helping us now?" Lucy asked, distrustful. "Because I saw what they did to your mother, and I've lived with that guilt ever since," he replied, his voice breaking. "Besides, there's something you need to know about Midnight. He's not just any horse in the program." Sam revealed that Midnight was the result of years of selective breeding, specifically designed for the program. His exceptional intelligence and sensitivity made him perfect for the experiments, but also made him more vulnerable to trauma. "His colt inherited the same characteristics," Sam continued. "Victoria plans to use both as the ultimate proof of her method." With the help of Robert and some loyal workers, Lucy developed a bold plan. While Sam kept Victoria distracted with a supposed crisis at another of their stables, Lucy and her team would split into two groups to simultaneously rescue Midnight and his colt. The operation began at dawn. Lucy, along with Robert, headed towards the southern stables where they were keeping Midnight. The journey was filled with tension. Every minute counted. Upon arrival, they found less security than expected, just as Sam had predicted. Midnight whinnied softly when he recognized Lucy, but something in his behavior had changed. His eyes showed a new level of fear. "They've been giving him something," Robert observed, pointing to needle marks on the stallion's neck. Meanwhile, the second team, led by a young stable hand named Mike, infiltrated the northern stables to rescue the colt. Extracting Midnight was more complicated than anticipated. The horse, although he recognized Lucy, was clearly affected by what they had done to him. It took all of the young woman's skill and patience to calm him enough to load him into the trailer. It was then that she received the message from Mike. "We have the colt, but there's a problem. We found documents. They're about your mother." Lucy's heart skipped a beat, but there was no time to stop. The plan was to meet at an abandoned ranch on the outskirts of the state, owned by Robert's family. During the journey, Lucy noticed that Midnight was becoming increasingly restless. "Something's not right," she murmured, observing how sweat began to cover the stallion's coat. Upon arriving at the meeting point, Mike's team was already waiting for them. The colt, although scared, seemed to be in better condition than his father. The moment of reunion between father and son was emotional, but brief. "Lucy, you need to see this," Mike said, handing her a worn folder. Inside, she found something that changed everything. A series of photographs and documents revealing that her mother had not only discovered the experiments, but had been developing an alternative training method, one based on healing trauma. "The horses aren't the only experiments," Mike explained. "Victoria has been studying how trauma is transmitted between generations, not just in horses, but in entire families of trainers." Suddenly, everything made sense. Lucy's gift with horses, the special connection with Midnight, her mother's disappearance. It was all part of a larger pattern, but they didn't have time to process this information. Midnight began to show signs of severe distress. His breathing became erratic, and his legs were shaking. They've given him something, Robert confirmed, examining the stallion. We need urgent veterinary help. While Robert made frantic calls, Lucy received another message from the unknown number. The antidote is in my old laboratory, under the loose floorboard next to the west window. Hurry. It's her, Lucy whispered. My mother is trying to help us. But before they could act, the sound of approaching vehicles alerted them. Victoria had found them. You have to go, Robert urged. I'll hold them off. No, Lucy replied, determination shining in her eyes. It's time to face this. For Midnight, for the cult, for my mother, for all those who have suffered under Victoria's experiments. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky blood red as Lucy prepared for the confrontation that would change everything. Midnight and his cult were together again, but the real battle was just beginning. The dust raised by the approaching vehicles created a golden veil in the sunset. Lucy stood firm in front of the barn, where Midnight and his cult were sheltered. Robert and Mike positioned themselves strategically, while the sound of engines grew closer. Victoria Hawthorne descended from the first vehicle with the elegance of a dark queen. Sam followed her, his face a mask of internal conflict. Impressive, Victoria said, her voice soft but laden with threat. You really are your mother's daughter. The same determination, the same naivety. It's over, Victoria, Lucy replied, holding her ground. We have proof of everything. The experiments, the blackmail, what you did to my mother. Victoria smiled, a gesture that didn't reach her eyes. And what will you do with that proof? Expose me? Like Isabel tried to do? She took a step closer. Your mother learned the hard way that there are secrets best kept hidden. Inside the barn, Midnight whinnied weakly. Time was running out. The antidote, Lucy demanded. I know you have it. Of course I have it, Victoria replied, pulling a small vial from her jacket. But it comes with a price. The same choice I gave your mother. Silence in exchange for life. Sam stepped forward. Enough, Victoria. This has gone too far. Now you have a conscience, Sam, Victoria mocked. After all these years? What happened next occurred in a matter of seconds. Sam, in an unexpected move, snatched the vial from Victoria's hands. In the confusion, Mike took advantage to subdue the security guards accompanying them. Lucy! Sam shouted, throwing the vial in her direction. Victoria pulled out a gun, but Robert was faster, tackling her before she could aim. The vial flew through the air in slow motion. Lucy caught it and ran towards the barn. Midnight was lying on the ground, his breathing becoming weaker, while his cult nervously circled him. With trembling hands, Lucy administered the antidote. Please, she whispered, stroking the stallion's neck. Don't give up. Outside, the situation had turned into controlled chaos. The police, alerted by Sam hours earlier, began to arrive. Victoria, subdued by Robert and the officers, maintained her haughty posture. You don't understand anything, Victoria said as they handcuffed her. What we did was for the advancement of science. Trauma is the key to controlling not just animals, but people. You're wrong, Lucy replied from the barn entrance. True control comes from trust and love, not fear. Inside the barn, Midnight began to show signs of improvement. His breathing normalized, and with Lucy's help, he managed to stand up. The colt neighed with joy, pressing against his father's side. As the police took Victoria away and began to collect evidence, an officer approached Lucy with an envelope. This was in Mrs. Hawthorne's vehicle, he said, handing it to her. Inside was a letter in a familiar handwriting and a key. Dear Lucy, if you're reading this, it means you've discovered the truth that I couldn't expose. The key opens a safety deposit box in the central bank. It contains all the evidence I gathered, including the formula to reverse the damage caused by Victoria's experiments. I'm sorry I wasn't there to watch you grow up, but I had to protect you. Now I know you're stronger than I was. I'm waiting for you at the place where it all began. With love, Mom. Tears ran down Lucy's cheeks as she read. Sam approached, his face showing years of remorse. Your mother is at the original Harrison Ranch, he revealed. The place where the first experiments began, before Victoria took control. She's been working in secret all these years, developing methods to heal the trauma we caused. Lucy looked at Midnight and his cult, now reunited and safe. Then that's what we'll do, she said with determination. We'll heal what they broke. The sun had finally set, but for the first time in a long time, the darkness didn't bring fear, but hope. Dawn found Lucy driving along a winding road into the mountains, following Sam's directions to the original Harrison Ranch. In the trailer behind her, Midnight and his colt traveled together, their occasional neighs breaking the silence of the dawn. Ellen sat beside her, her hands clasped in her lap, her face a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. "It's been 15 years, she murmured, more to herself than to Lucy. The ranch gradually appeared before them, a structure of stone and wood that seemed to blend into the mountainous landscape. The stables, though old, were well maintained, and several horses grazed freely in the surrounding fields. As they parked in front of the main house, Lucy noticed something different about these horses. They didn't show the fear or distrust she had seen in Victoria's stables. Their movements were natural, relaxed. A figure emerged from the main stable, tall, with black hair streaked with grey and the same honey-coloured eyes as Lucy. She stopped halfway, as if her feet had frozen to the ground. "Mom," Lucy whispered, and the word seemed to fill the entire valley. Isabel Morgan had aged, but her eyes maintained the same intensity that Lucy vaguely remembered from her childhood. For a moment, neither of them moved, as if they feared any movement might break the spell of the moment. It was Ellen who broke the silence. "Isabel," she called, her voice breaking. The sound seemed to free mother and daughter from their paralysis. In seconds, they were wrapped in an embrace that contained 15 years of absence, of unspoken words, of lost moments. "I'm so sorry," Isabel sobbed, stroking her daughter's hair. "I had to protect you. I had to find a way to stop them." As they separated, a neigh from the trailer called their attention. Isabel approached, her eyes widening with recognition as she saw Midnight. "Shadow's son," she murmured, extending a hand towards the stallion. "And his colt." "Shadow?" Lucy asked. "Midnight's father," Isabel explained. "It was with him that I discovered what Victoria was doing. He was special, like his son, like you." Over the next few hours, as they released Midnight and his colt into one of the corrals, Isabel shared the full story. How she had discovered that Victoria was using conditioning techniques based on generational trauma, not just on horses, but also on the families that bred them. "The gift we have," Isabel explained, observing how Lucy calmed Midnight with just her presence. "It's not a coincidence. It comes from generations of connection with these animals. Victoria wanted to corrupt that, turn it into a tool of control." In the ranch's laboratory, Isabel showed them her work from the last 15 years, research on healing techniques, documentation of the effects of trauma on different generations of horses, and methods to reverse the damage. "Every horse here," she said, pointing towards the fields, "is a survivor of Victoria's experiments. I've been rehabilitating them one by one." "Why didn't you look for me sooner?" Lucy asked, the question that had been burning in her heart. Isabel sat heavily in a chair. "Victoria had eyes everywhere. If I had approached you, I would have put you on her radar. I needed time to gather enough evidence to develop a method that could counteract her work. But I watched over you, Lucy. I knew you had inherited the gift." "The anonymous letters?" Lucy understood. "Yes. When I saw you approaching Midnight, I knew it was time. He is the living proof of what Victoria has been doing, but also that the damage can be healed." That night, as the last rays of sun painted the mountains gold, Lucy watched from the fence how Midnight and his colt galloped together freely for the first time. Isabel joined her, putting an arm around her shoulders. "What do we do now?" Lucy asked. "Now," Isabel replied, "we begin to heal. Not just the horses, but all the families affected by Victoria's experiments. And we'll do it together." On the horizon, the silhouettes of mother and daughter merged into one, while the neighs of free horses filled the air with promises of a new dawn. The days following the reunion were a whirlwind of emotions and discoveries for Lucy. Isabel's ranch became the epicenter of a large-scale rescue and rehabilitation operation. With Victoria Hawthorne's fall, the stables and training centers associated with her across the country began to be investigated, releasing dozens of traumatized horses. Lucy worked tirelessly alongside her mother, learning the techniques Isabel had developed during years of secret research. Each day brought new challenges and revelations. One morning, while working with a group of newly rescued mares, Isabel shared a revelation that shook Lucy. "Trauma doesn't just affect horses physically," Isabel explained, gently guiding a nervous mare. "It also alters their energetic connection with the world and with other living beings. What we do here is more than physical rehabilitation. We're re-establishing a cosmic balance. Lucy absorbed every word, feeling how pieces of an invisible puzzle fit together in her mind. Her gift, the special connection she had always felt with horses, began to make deeper sense. Meanwhile, Midnight and his colt, whom they had named Star, became the focus of an intensive study. Their bond, broken by Victoria's experiments but now in the process of healing, offered invaluable information about how trauma and healing were transmitted between generations. One day, as they watched the pair galloping freely through the fields, Sam Harrison arrived at the ranch. His face showed the weight of guilt and remorse. "I've come to offer my help," he said, his voice laden with emotion, "and to ask for forgiveness." Isabel looked at him for a long time before responding. "Forgiveness is a process, Sam, but help is welcome. There's a lot of work to do." With Sam's incorporation, the team gained access to a wider network of contacts in the equestrian world. Soon, the ranch became a pilgrimage center for trainers, veterinarians, and horse lovers from all over the world, eager to learn Isabel and Lucy's healing methods. But not everything was easy. Many of the rescued horses showed levels of trauma so deep that they seemed unreachable. It was during one of these difficult cases that Lucy discovered a new dimension of her gift. She was working with a stallion named Thunder, who refused to let anyone get close to him. Frustrated after days of failed attempts, Lucy sat on the ground of the corral, closing her eyes and breathing deeply. Suddenly, she felt as if an electric current ran through her body. When she opened her eyes, she saw the world in a completely new way. She could perceive the energy lines that connected everything, the grass, the trees, the horses, herself. And there, in the center of Thunder, she saw a dark knot of traumatic energy. Without thinking, Lucy extended her hand. To the amazement of all present, Thunder slowly approached, allowing himself to be touched for the first time. Under Lucy's fingers, the knot of energy began to dissolve. "How?" asked Sam, astonished. Isabel smiled, her eyes shining with tears of pride and understanding. "It's the next level of the gift," she explained. "Lucy can not only connect emotionally with horses, she can see and manipulate the energy of trauma itself." This revelation opened new doors in their research. Lucy began working with Isabel to document and better understand this ability, looking for ways to teach it to others. As the weeks passed, the ranch transformed. The stables, once silent and tense, now resonated with joyful neighs. The fields filled with horses galloping freely, their traumas slowly healing under the loving care of the team. One afternoon, as they watched the sunset from the house's porch, Isabel took Lucy's hand. "You know," she said softly, "when I started this work, I thought I was sacrificing my relationship with you for a greater good. Now I see that the universe had a bigger plan. We're not just healing these horses, we're healing ourselves, our family." Lucy squeezed her mother's hand, feeling the weight of truth in her words. "What's next now?" she asked. Isabel smiled, looking towards the fields where Midnight and Star were resting under a tree. "Now, my love, we take this knowledge to the world. It's time for others to learn what we've discovered here." As the sun sank into the horizon, Lucy felt a wave of anticipation. The road ahead was long, but for the first time in her life, she felt completely prepared to face it. The following month saw a transformation not only in the ranch, but in Lucy's life and in the equestrian world in general. The Morgan method, as the media had dubbed it, began to gain international recognition. Trainers, veterinarians, and therapists from all over the world came to the ranch to learn the energy healing techniques that Isabel and Lucy had perfected. However, with growth came new challenges. Not everyone in the equestrian community was willing to accept these revolutionary methods. Critics argued that the approach was too esoteric or lacking scientific basis, despite the evident results in rehabilitated horses. Lucy found herself at the center of this controversy. Her ability to manipulate the energy of trauma in horses made her the focus of intense scrutiny. Some called her a fraud, others hailed her as a kind of living miracle. One morning, as Lucy worked with a group of students in the main field, a reporter approached the ranch. He was from a renowned equestrian magazine, and his presence put everyone on alert. "Miss Morgan," the reporter called out, approaching with a notebook in hand, "there are rumors that you can see trauma in horses. How do you respond to accusations that all of this is an elaborate trick? Lucy took a deep breath, remembering her mother's words about the importance of transparency and education. It's not a trick, she responded calmly. It's an ability that we've discovered exists in many people, albeit to different degrees. We're working to understand it better and teach others how to develop it. The reporter seemed skeptical, but before he could ask more questions, a neigh of distress echoed across the field. One of the newly arrived horses, an Appaloosa named Speckle, had panicked and was running out of control, endangering other horses and students. Without hesitation, Lucy ran towards the horse. Those present held their breath, fearing the worst. But when Lucy approached Speckle, something extraordinary happened. The horse stopped dead in its tracks, its eyes fixed on the young woman. Lucy closed her eyes, extending her hands towards the animal. To everyone's amazement, including the skeptical reporter, a faint light seemed to emanate from her palms. Speckle visibly shuddered, and then, little by little, its posture relaxed. When Lucy opened her eyes, the horse approached docilely, resting its head on her shoulder. The ranch fell silent, broken only by the sound of the reporter's camera shutter. This incident became a turning point. The story and photographs went viral, drawing even more attention to the Morgans' work. Universities began to request collaborations to scientifically study the phenomenon, while veterinary clinics worldwide asked for training in the Morgan method. Isabel, seeing the growing demand, proposed a bold idea: to create an international academy of equine energy healing. "It's time to expand," she told Lucy one night, as they reviewed plans and proposals. "We can establish training centers in different parts of the world, teach others what we've learned." Lucy, although excited by the possibility, felt a pang of concern. "What if we lose the essence of what we do by growing so much?" she asked. Isabel smiled, understanding her daughter's concerns. "It's a risk," she admitted, "but it's also an opportunity to change the way the world interacts with these beautiful animals. Besides," she added with a wink, "I have a feeling we're not the only ones with this gift. There are others out there who need guidance." As they discussed the details of the expansion plan, a familiar neigh called them from outside. Midnight and Star were in the nearby field, their figures illuminated by moonlight. Lucy approached the window, watching the two horses play under the stars. They were the living reminder of why they did this work, of what was at stake. "You're right, Mom," she finally said, turning to Isabel with determination shining in her eyes. "It's time to take this to the world." As they prepared to take the next step in their journey, Lucy couldn't help but feel they were on the brink of something much bigger than they had imagined. The road ahead was full of promises and dangers, but with Midnight as her inspiration and her mother's legacy as a guide, she felt ready to face any challenge. What neither of them knew was that their greatest test was yet to come, one that would put to the test not only their abilities, but their faith in everything they had built. The dawn of a new day found Lucy standing on top of a hill, observing the vast complex that now stretched where her mother's modest ranch once stood. The International Morgan Academy of Equine Energy Healing was now a reality, with students and horses from all over the world living and learning in harmony. 5 years had passed since the expansion, and the road had not been easy. There had been moments of doubt, fierce criticism, and seemingly insurmountable obstacles. But with each challenge, the Morgan method had strengthened and refined itself. Lucy descended the hill towards the main field, where a diverse group of students was preparing for the graduation ceremony. Among them, she recognized faces from places as far away as Japan, South Africa, and Norway. Each of them carried the same spark in their eyes that she had first seen in herself years ago, the understanding of a deep connection with horses and the natural world. Isabel joined her hair now completely gray, but her eyes as lively as ever. "Ready for the big day?" she asked, linking her arm with her daughter's. Lucy nodded, but before she could respond, a commotion near the main stables caught her attention. They ran towards the disturbance, finding a group of students and staff surrounding a mare in evident distress. "It's Aurora," one of the caretakers explained. "She went into labor early, and something's wrong. The vet is on the way, but..." Without hesitation, Lucy approached the mare. Placing her hands on Aurora's swollen belly, she closed her eyes and concentrated. The world around her faded as she immersed herself in the flow of energy. What she saw left her breathless. The foal was entangled in its own umbilical cord, struggling to be born. But there was something else, a darkness she hadn't seen before, an energy that seemed to come from a place beyond this world. Lucy opened her eyes, meeting her mother's worried gaze. "It's more than a difficult birth," she whispered. "There's something dark interfering." Isabel nodded, understanding immediately. "What we feared would eventually happen," she said quietly. "Someone is using Victoria's techniques for evil." Without wasting time, mother and daughter positioned themselves on either side of Aurora. The students and staff formed a circle around them, instinctively creating a sacred space. Lucy and Isabel joined their hands over the mare's belly, closing their eyes and synchronizing their breathing. As they deepened their connection, a soft light began to emanate from their hands, visible to all present. Minutes passed in tense silence, broken only by Aurora's occasional whimpers. Gradually, the light surrounding Lucy and Isabel intensified, extending to envelop the mare in a luminous cocoon. Suddenly, Aurora neighed loudly and began to push. Lucy opened her eyes, keeping one hand on the mare while guiding the birth with the other. With a final effort, the foal was born, its wet coat shining under the light that still persisted. While the assistants rushed to attend to the newborn, Lucy turned to her mother, both exhausted but radiant. "You felt it, didn't you?" Isabel asked. Lucy nodded. "Someone tried to interfere with the birth, used the moment of vulnerability to corrupt the foal. And we stopped it," Isabel completed, a mixture of pride and concern in her voice. "But this is just the beginning. There are others out there who will seek to use our methods for dark purposes." The veterinarian arrived shortly after, amazed by the perfect health of both mother and foal, despite the complicated birth. News of the miracle spread quickly through the academy, adding an air of magic to the already exciting graduation day. That night, after the new graduates had departed to take the Morgan method to their respective countries, Lucy found herself again on the hill, this time accompanied not only by her mother, but also by Midnight and Star, now a majestic adult stallion like his father. "What do we do now?" Lucy asked, stroking Midnight's neck. "If there are others using these abilities for evil..." Isabel smiled, her gaze lost on the horizon. "We move forward, my love. We teach, we heal, and above all we love. Love and light will always be stronger than darkness." As the sun set, painting the sky in golden and pink hues, Lucy felt a deep peace envelop her. The road ahead was full of challenges, yes, but also of hope and infinite possibilities. "We are guardians of a legacy of light," she murmured, the words resonating with a profound truth. Isabel nodded, taking her daughter's hand. "And that legacy will live far beyond us, in every heart we touch, in every horse we heal." Together, mother and daughter, along with Midnight and Star, contemplated the sunset, knowing that each new dawn would bring with it the opportunity to expand that legacy of light, to heal not just horses, but the entire world. And so, as the stars began to peek out in the twilight sky, Lucy understood that her journey, far from ending, was just beginning. With the knowledge of the past, the strength of the present, and the promise of the future, she was ready to face any challenge that fate might put in her path. The wind blew gently, bringing with it the scent of fresh grass and fulfilled promises. In the distance, the neigh of a free horse resonated as a reminder of all they had achieved and all that was yet to come. Lucy smiled, her heart full of gratitude and determination. The legacy of light shone brightly, and she was ready to carry it forward, towards a future full of hope and healing for all.